From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We've got a great show ahead for you today. We're talking about a future saint and a famous saint, the future saint being Blessed Michael McGivney. We'll be talking with his vice-postulator, Brian V. Caufield, about the great miracle that led to his beatification and the outlook for miracles coming up for his canonization, if there are any. We'll be also talking with Bret Thoman, the author of St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister. We'll be talking about St. Clare, whose feast day is coming right up on August 11th. Check out my series, They Might Be Saints, where we look at people on the path to sainthood and the search for canonization miracles. And on Sunday, August 9th at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, the They Might Be Saints episode is on Father Michael McGivney. I examine the canonization cause for Father Michael McGivney, and he, of course, is the founder of the Knights of Columbus, beatified in 2020 after the miraculous cure of a young boy with fetal eye drops. Check that one out. They Might Be Saints. You can go to theymightbesaints.com to watch any of the episodes on demand for free. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. That's my other one, on Saturday, August 8th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, Rocamadour. In the Church of Rocamadour houses an image and bell that, according to legend, mysteriously rings out to herald miracles happening on the high seas. Check that one out. Explore with the Miracle Hunter on Saturday, August 8th. And coming soon at the end of this month, on August 29th, the series Hidden Gems begins to air on EWTN as a series. People can go to shrines.tv to learn more information about this new series. But this is the new project where we look at American shrines and the shrines, the backstory of these shrines and how they came to be and the great devotions that are associated with them. And so you'll be seeing Nell Andrzejewski, the host of that one, starting on August 29th, and we'll be talking more about that in future episodes. But get ready for Hidden Gems. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week, where we look at a Marian devotion of the day as it lines up exactly to the day's date. You all know Fatima May 13th, or Lourdes February 11th, or Guadalupe December 12th, but believe it or not, there's a different other Marian devotion from somewhere around the world that lines up exactly to the day's date. And for today's date, we've got Holy Mary of the Oak from Lucignano in Italy in the year 1467. And the Might Be Saint of the day is Blessed Maria Anna Rosa Caiani from Italy. And we always try to find somebody whose feast day or death anniversary is upon us, and we always look at those people who might be saints, those people who are servants of God, venerables, and blesseds before they have all their miracles recognized by Rome. And people can check out my book, They Might Be Saints, which also presents this same idea. And the question of the week, this is an interesting one. Why does the Vatican both declare miracles for saints and refuse to declare miracles for apparitions? I'll do my best to answer that one in just a little bit. In the miracle of the day, on August 8th, today's date, in the year 1961, Jesuit priest Father Luis Maria Andreu was at Garabandal and had what he considered to be a miraculous experience. We'll be talking about that one in just a little bit. And speaking of apparitions that don't have the full approval of the Church, we have news coming out of Medjugorje. The Pope encourages youth in Medjugorje to rediscover beauty of faith in the Lord. So this is in a message signed by the Cardinal Secretary of State, Pietro Parolin, for the opening of the Youth Festival there in Medjugorje was held at the shrine in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Pope Leo urged young people not to be seduced by the illusions of fleeting happiness, but by following Jesus, even the deepest questions and anxieties of heart can become an opportunity for discernment and growth in faith. And so this was this annual celebration, the heart of the message of Pope Leo, through a message signed, addressed to the young people from 73 countries gathered in Medjugorje for the opening of Mladefest. That's the International Youth Festival there. It's been going on since 1989, and the festival takes place annually with a Eucharistic celebration at the outdoor altar of St. James Parish there. And the message was read by Archbishop Aldo Cavalli, the apostolic visitor with a special assignment for the parish of Medjugorje, shortly before the Mass, celebrated by Archbishop Francis Assisi Chulicati, the apostolic nuncio for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro. And in this message, the Pope encouraged young people to return to Christ, the source of new life and authentic joy, ad fontem. Through prayer, listening to the Word of God, and the sacraments, he invites them to rediscover the beauty of a personal encounter with the Lord, who quenches every heart and gives the strength to always begin anew. And so this is the annual celebration for youth in Medjugorje. And of course, as of 2024, we see Medjugorje now with the nihil obstat granted by the Church. Nothing stands in the way. So this is the highest level of approval that the Church can give at this time towards a Marian apparition. But of course, it has never declared the apparitions at Medjugorje supernatural in character. But this is certainly a tremendous event of 73 countries, people coming from all over the world to be celebrating with Mary. And so this is a big moment where Pope Leo is giving his message to the faithful there. And check out the Facebook feed of the Miracle Hunter for more miracle news posted there each week. And we always pick the biggest item each and every week for the radio show. But check out the Facebook feed of the Miracle Hunter for miracles being posted each and every day. Let's take a look at Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we look at a trivia question and give out a prize to an emailer who writes in the fastest with the correct answer. And the question from last week was, what saint did Catherine Labouré have visions of before seeing the Virgin Mary? And the answer is before the Virgin Mary appeared to St. Catherine Labouré. Of course, those are the miraculous medal visions. She experienced remarkable visions connected to Blessed Vincent de Paul. And during the 1830 translation of his relics, Catherine reported seeing his heart appear above the reliquary on 3 occasions. And his heart appeared first white, then red, then finally a dark reddish color, symbolizing peace, zeal of charity, and the trials that would soon befall France and the Church. Catherine understood that these visions were a preparation for the extraordinary Marian apparitions that would follow and lead to the devotion to the miraculous medal. And so that was last week's question. And for this week, we have the question, at which parish did Father Michael McGivney found the Knights of Columbus? We'll be talking today with the vice-postulator Brian V. Caufield. So again, the question is, at which parish did Blessed Father Michael McGivney found the Knights of Columbus? If you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, the image of the faces of Mary, send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe you'll be the fastest with the right answer. And answers and winners will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Brian V. Caufield, the vice-postulator for Blessed Michael McGivney. Stay with us for that.
We're speaking today with Michael O'Neill. He is, of course, the Miracle Hunter, very well known on EWTN Radio, and a similar program on EWTN television called Explore with the Miracle Hunter. Michael, do you get much feedback from your listeners and your viewers on the topics that you talk about and the places you've been?
Well, one of the great blessings of working with EWTN and having the job that I do is that I love to be able to tell the stories of miracles on radio and on television. And one of the great aspects of that has been the Explore with the Miracle Hunter television series, in which I've been able to travel to so many shrines around the world, always places of great miracles. That's how I choose where we go. Catholics know around the world about Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe, these big-name miracle places, and of course those are very important. And I love when we air an episode about a little-known place that most people haven't heard of. Even devout Catholics who are kind of tuned into miracles will send me an email and say, I've never heard of that. Why don't people know this story? And I feel so emboldened and encouraged to do more stories because that's part of the mission to spread God's great work through miracles around the world. And it's a great honor and blessing to be able to do that. And it's a lot of fun to travel the world. And people often say to me, I don't have the money to travel, or I'm sick, or I'm elderly, or whatever the reason might be that their life circumstances don't allow it. And so people who tune into the show, and they can kind of travel with me in some ways. And I love to bring the stories home to them.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I always love talking about future American saints, and there are some people in the United States who are very near and dear to my heart, and one of those is Blessed Michael McGivney. I myself am a Knight of Columbus, and I really admire the great work of that future saint and the impact that he's had on the entire world. And just some years ago now, I guess the years are passing by, but it was in 2020, I was there at the beatification. It was the recognition of that miracle that happened and that resulted in him being beatified there in Connecticut. It was such an honor to be there and to film with EWTN. People can check out that series, They Might Be Saints, an episode on Blessed Michael McGivney. Well, we're so grateful to be joined again today by the vice-postulator for the canonization cause for Father Michael McGivney, and that is Brian V. Caufield. Welcome back to the program today, Brian.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's always an honor to be on your show and to talk to your audience about Blessed Michael McGivney, founder of the Knights of Columbus.
And it's great timing because his feast day is coming right up, and this is a great time of year, as is always, to reflect on the great work of Michael McGivney. And for those, and of course, the largest fraternal Catholic organization in the world, that being the Knights of Columbus. So he's had such a huge impact worldwide. Why do you think it is that people gravitate to this figure, Michael McGivney?
Well, that's a good question. In fact, just today, we get on the website, fathermcgivney.org, we have a prominent button there where you can submit petitions. And today we got a petition from a gentleman in Nairobi, Kenya. And to my memory, it's been vice-postulator since 2011. That's the first we've ever received from that country. And it always intrigues me, how people hear about Father McGivney in such, really far away, and we don't, the Knights don't have, formal operations in Kenya. And we also receive a lot of, from Brazil and from Argentina. And again, we don't have any formal operations there of the Knights of Columbus. And I haven't had a chance to reach out to the gentleman from Kenya, but I did in the past, like some of the South American, how did you hear about this? And, some of the responses were, I was going on the internet to find someone who's blessed, because I figured, that person would be more receptive in this very Catholic way of thinking.
Yes, right.
That person who needs another miracle would be, more receptive to the kind of petition that I have. And I came across, one of the newer blesseds, Father McGivney, and I took one look at his picture on the website, and I said, that's the priest I want praying for me.
All right.
And it's kind of an amazing thing. I mean, Father McGivney was known. We have written records of this, of contemporaries, of his time, that he had a magnetic personality. And not because he was always out there saying, hey, look at me, but because people saw in him someone who was totally devoted and invested in his priesthood, in his ministry, and in the good that he could do right there and at that moment for the person in front of him. And I think that's what attracts people to Father McGivney.
Absolutely. And of course we have Father Michael McGivney and the Knights of the Columbus inextricably tied. They go together. He's the founder of the Knights of Columbus. Talk a little bit about that history. How did it get off the ground? Why was it founded in the first place by Father McGivney?
So we're going back to a time in the late 19th century America. And often when I talk about Father McGivney, I reference it by saying some of the first members of the Knights of Columbus that fought in the U.S. Civil War.
Wow.
So that kind of brings people, oh, wow, okay, now we're really talking about. So it's the organization itself is 144 years old. Father McGivney, he was the first of 13 children born to Patrick and Mary, both of whom were Irish immigrants into Connecticut. They came on separate boats. We were able to find, through the records on Ellis Island, that they came on separate boats around the same time. They actually grew up like 12 miles away from one another, different parishes in Ireland, but as we often think, there was like a mountain between their two towns. So like the lorry or the donkey couldn't get over the hill or something. So they probably never knew one another before they came to America. They came in 1850. They were married in 1851. Michael was born in 1852. A typical Irish immigrant family. Not dirt poor, because Patrick, the father, was able to get a job in a factory in Waterbury, Connecticut, as an iron molder, which was more than just like your assembly line kind of job. But still, it was, the noxious fumes, and, they didn't have health insurance in those days. They probably didn't have much of health care in those days. So men tended to die young. Michael's father died when Patrick was 48. Michael at the time was 20 years old. He was in seminary. He thought he'd have to come home. Well, he did come home for the funeral, and then he stayed home because, he's the oldest of 13 children, and he's got to go to work, like every other young man whose father dies, right? But it turns out the bishop of Connecticut at that time saw that his star seminarian with great promise was thinking of dropping out, and so he gave him, unusual in those days, a scholarship, to continue his seminary studies. So Michael's ordained in 1877. His first assignment in New Haven, where the Knights of Columbus were founded. He's a junior priest in a large parish, St. Mary's Parish. The pastor is sickly. And Michael actually writes back to his seminary professor, please excuse me for not writing earlier, but, the pastor has been sickly, and the whole work of the parish has been on my shoulders since I got here. I've not had a day off. Just, you wonder why, a priest today can probably sympathize with that, with, the shortage of priests in many places, and the merging of parishes and things like that. So here's something that always fascinates me with Father McGivney. Okay, he's the curate, like the assistant priest in the parish, right?
Yes.
In 1881, he is, like 29 years old. He calls together, what he called the go-ahead men of New Haven, and says we're going to found, a new organization, new fraternal benefit organization, because he knew from his own experience that when the breadwinner dies, usually the father, and many children left behind, you could really be in big financial trouble, with no safety net in those days, especially if you're Catholic, right? It was kind of a time of anti-Catholic, know-nothing, anti-Catholicism. And so after this meeting, he said this is going to be a lay organization that will support the church, but won't be an organization of the church, right? And I will be, like your chaplain. And they prevailed on him. They begged him to be the head of it. So here are the men. A lot of them are Civil War veterans. They're probably 40 years old, more than 10 years older than Father McGivney. He's not even the pastor. And they're asking him to be their leader, and he declines. But it just shows his humility. But it also shows his leadership qualities. I mean, he was only a few years out of seminary. So there must have been something about him, especially that would, lead these men who were kind of accomplished in their own. They were a police constable. There was a lawyer. They were a business owner, making their own way in the world. But yet they turn to Father McGivney and say, "You lead us." So that always fascinated me. So they were really, the reason that he actually wrote out was, we are forming a new Catholic organization, called the Knights of Columbus, and we are doing this in order to stop the men of our parish, the Catholic men, from joining these other secret societies, Masonic societies, which, especially in those days, were like rabidly anti-Catholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to provide equal or better benefits, meaning mainly like a death benefit. So it was like it was a nascent early form of life insurance, where all the men would chip in when someone died, and they give the widow, a certain purse and things like that. So, and it was also, of course, to keep men close to the church, to keep them close to their families, and hopefully, bond together in that good Catholic brotherhood.
Amazing. We've been talking today with Brian V. Caufield, the vice-postulator for the canonization cause of Michael McGivney. And now in 2020, we were there and in Connecticut to celebrate the big event, the beatification of Father Michael McGivney, making him one of just a handful of blesseds here in the United States. And now, in order for him to move from blessed to saint, a second miracle must be recognized. But before we move to that, any new movement on that, let's talk a little bit about Mikey Shackle. He was the miracle recipient in what led to the beatification of Father Michael McGivney. And we've talked about this on the show before, but I think that it is such an amazing story. For those people who don't know, I'd love to recap just a bit. Tell us again about the miracle that led to the beatification of Father McGivney.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And little Mikey Shackle, well, he's 11 years old now. His parents, his mother, Michelle, was pregnant with that family's 13th child. And they got a diagnosis, an early diagnosis of Down syndrome. And, this was at a secular hospital down in Tennessee, in Nashville. And, the doctors offered, like they do, unfortunately, abortion with a Down syndrome child. And of course, Daniel and Michelle, the Shackle parents, declined. Michelle a little more politely than Daniel, even to this day, he said, I really didn't like a doctor telling me to kill my child, But, Daniel's he was in the Air Force, he's about 6'5", and, he's a spiritual warrior, put it that way. Mm-hmm. But, so they got that diagnosis. But then a little later in the pregnancy, they got a fatal diagnosis called fetal hydrops, with 2 or more organs of the unborn baby filled with fluid, often associated with Down syndrome. There's no cure, there's no treatment, right? And occasionally it may resolve on its own, but not when it's this late onset in the pregnancy and not this serious. I mean, the diagnosis is 2 or more organs. They're talking maybe heart and liver, let's say. The ultrasound of this Mikey in the womb, I mean, his dad says this, so I can say it too. It looked like a inflated water balloon. It's like 20-something, 26 weeks or 27 weeks, and you could hardly even make out the facial features on the ultrasound. So it's that serious. The fluid was infused all through the body. And so the doctor, said there's no hope. Again, they turned down abortion. And so it happens, Daniel is an agent, with the Knights of Columbus. So he knew all about Father McGivney. He also knew that he needed a miracle to move to beatification. So, smart Daniel, and they had their homeschool named after Father McGivney. So they already had a relationship with Father McGivney's intercession. So, he tells all his agents, and so it went all through the 1,000 agents throughout the country of Knights of Columbus to pray to Father McGivney for this unborn child. Michelle had a whole network of homeschool mothers, who are warriors in their own right, certainly. And, to pray exclusively to Father McGivney for this unborn child. And so, long story short, when they, they'd gone to Fatima as part of an incentive for the agents. And during that time, they were also praying for Father McGivney. and they didn't really tell anyone at the time. So at the Mass at Fatima, our Supreme Chaplain, Archbishop Laurie of Baltimore, is, the gospel that day is from John chapter 5, where the Roman official comes to Jesus and says, "My son is dying, unto death." And Jesus says, "Go, your faith is so great, your son is healed." And the moment Michelle and Daniel heard that, in the pews, they looked at one another, and Michelle said later that it was like something, a veil lifted over her, lifted off her, like all the anxiety and the worry. And she just put everything in God's hands, and she suspected something really had happened. So they got back to Nashville, the same doctor, a new doctor who was doing the ultrasound, and there was no high drops. They couldn't find any high drops. The child was completely healed. He still had Down syndrome, born a few weeks early in 2015. But there was no explanation. There had been no treatment. And so, of course, it took a few years, to investigate this, get all the testimony, get all the medical records. And, thank God in May of 2020, Pope Francis approved this as a miracle through the intercession of Father McGivney. And, the beatification was in Hartford Archdiocese in October of 2020, right during COVID.
Yeah, I remember that. Absolutely amazing. We're so grateful to you, Brian V. Caufield, the vice-postulator for Blessed Michael McGivney, for recounting that incredible miracle story and telling us the background about the Knights of Columbus and how it was formed. And of course, we're all hoping and praying for that second miracle, and there are knights around the world, of course, who have a great devotion to their founder, Father Michael McGivney. And so no doubt a second miracle is on its way, and we'll soon see him be canonized in the years to come. But for people who want to connect to the Knights of Columbus, or to learn about any of these special email blasts that you have related to sort of the messages of Father Michael McGivney, what's the best way that people can learn more and sign up?
Yeah, well, we have a website, fathermcgivney.org, and that's MCGIVNEY.org, and you can sign up. There's a button right on top there where you can sign up for the Guild. It's free membership. We have a little over 180,000 members right now, and through the website you can learn all about the life, the works, and the miracle, and devotion to Father McGivney, and sign up for the Guild. And when you sign up for the Guild, you become really an active member. If you're willing to pray regularly for his intercession, and I broke it down like the three things: you join. Right, you become a member, you pray for your intentions through his intercession, and then you report any favors. And, we love to get, of course we want that one favor that's going to go all the way to the Vatican and, to the canonization, the miraculous healing. But we really are thrilled, every week when we receive what I call the everyday favors. And that's so much Father McGivney. Father McGivney was the priest of the everyday, the priest of the ordinary, the saint of the ordinary. That's so much of what he does. And, this could be something to do with finances. It could be something to do with job loss, something to do with family reconciliation, something to do with, we have a lot of parents praying for their adult children to come back to the church, and many reports of those kind of favors. So please, fathermcgivney.org. You'll get a quarterly print newsletter. And also about 18 months ago, we started what we call the monthly McGivney message. And that's an email blast to all members. And, I kind of do a little short précis at top, sometimes looking at what Father McGivney was doing at this month, sometime during his life, or it can be some important event in Father McGivney's life, or it can be, something about the liturgical year, fitting Father McGivney in there. And then we print 2 recent favors. Usually there are 2 favors reported since the last email blast, so we do get that many, 2 a month. And and there's sometimes links to a video having to do with Father McGivney. So it's something comes in your inbox, usually like 9 o'clock, middle of the month, and we receive a lot of as a result of that email blast, we usually get 50 to 100, like within the next few days, petitions from people and some favors. I hadn't reported this before, but I just got the email and I just remembered, this happened, So it's a wonderful little community, or really big community in a way, that we have under the intercession and protection of Father McGivney.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to you, Brian V. Caufield, the vice-postulator for Blessed Michael McGivney, for joining us to tell us about the miracle of Father McGivney and the search for new miracles. Thank you so much for joining us on today's program.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
God bless. That was Brian V. Caufield. Excellent stuff, talking about the founder of the Knights of Columbus. That's Father Michael McGivney. And we're so grateful to Brian for joining us on today's program. And we need to take a short break, but when we come back, why does the Vatican both declare miracles for sainthood but refuse to declare miracles for apparitions? I'll do my best to answer that one in just a little bit. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I think that it's always interesting to see what people are thinking about related to miracles. I'm always getting some good and interesting and strange and fun questions coming my way. But I also love answering questions in person, and I do that when I give talks. I travel around the country and go to 10 or 20 places around the country and always present about miracles, of course, whether it's Eucharistic miracles or Marian apparitions or the miracles of the saints. Always talking about miracles all the time. And I love to open it up to questions at the end of each of those presentations. And people can go to miraclehunter.com and click on the Contact tab and send me a message that way. And maybe I'll be speaking at a parish near you sometime soon. Just this past weekend, I was actually in Connecticut, the state home of Michael McGivney, actually, as it turns out, to stay on theme. But I was presenting a new film to the Knights of Lithuania. And this was a program about Our Lady of Shulava named Miracles of Shulava, that Marian apparition happening in 1608 and became the first of any approved Marian apparition from Europe, as it turns out. And the story of the resilience of the Lithuanian people, especially through the times of communism, is absolutely amazing. And so I was so honored to be able to present that story to the Knights of Lithuania, which they sponsored to be airing on EWTN coming soon. And for organizations that have ideas for television series or programs and would like to sponsor a program, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and I'd be happy to talk to you about any sponsorship opportunities for other programs to air on EWTN. And so the question for this week that came to me through email was, why does the Vatican both declare miracles for saints but refuse to declare miracles for apparitions? And that's from ML, was the person who wrote in with that question. And that's a good question. I think this is interesting. Maybe most people don't realize this, but of course, at the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, which investigates the lives of virtue of the saints and validates miracles worked through their singular intercession, which pushes them along from servant of God to venerable to blessed and then to saint, the Church absolutely declares miracles as being authentic and saying that this is proof that that saint interceded. And they go through a very strict process of investigation on the local level, and then it's sent to the Vatican in this positio, this academic position paper laying out all the details of the miracle. Then the medical commission investigates and validates, and the theological commission makes sure it's a case of singular intercession, and then they declare the miracle in a formal decree through the Pope. And so that's a very very well-oiled machine, that declaration of miracle, and a needed thing when miracles are found for canonization causes. However, down the hall, you might say, at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, you might say that the Vatican no longer approves any miracles, especially related to Marian apparitions or Eucharistic miracles or weeping statues or incorruptible saints or any of the other types of miracles that the Church may have formally made a declaration on. Now the highest level of approval is nihil obstat. Nothing stands in the way. The Church has no process for declaring something constate supernaturalitate, established as supernatural, as it did in the past. As of 2024, the rules have changed. And the question is, and of course there is a little carve-out in the most recent 2024 document that Pope Leo can, if he wants, declare something supernatural, but they don't give you any details about how that could possibly happen or what the process would be. They just say, well, he's the Pope, he can do what he wants. And so the question from ML is, how can we see the inconsistency between down the hall at the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints will declare miracles, and then for the Doctrine of the Faith, that Dicastery will not declare a miracle. So why the inconsistency? Well, perhaps there are two different departments of the Vatican doing their own thing, but perhaps it's much easier to find proof-positive miracles when it comes to healing miracles, because you have the proof of medical tests before and after, MRIs and otherwise. You can tell when there's definitely been a healing because proof positive, you can compare the before and after. When it comes to proving Marian apparitions and other miracles, perhaps it is more difficult to have such positive assertion that a miracle really did happen. I don't know if that's the real reason why we see the difference in the two places, but there certainly is a difference, and perhaps at some point Pope Leo or others at the Vatican might address the difference in the way miracles are dealt with. But that is an excellent question from Emil. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe we'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion of the days. It lines up exactly to the day's date. You know, Fatima, May 13th, or Lourdes, February 11th, or Guadalupe, December 12th. But believe it or not, there's a different Marian devotion for each and every day of the calendar year, whether it's the celebration of a feast day, the building of a basilica, the honoring of a miracle that happened on that date. But for today's date, August 8th, we have Holy Mary of the Oak, from Lucignano in Italy in the year 1467. And the story goes that beneath a large oak, a shrine was constructed in Lucignano with a fresco of the Pietà painted by Feliciano Bartone in the year 1417. The title of the Madonna of the Oak became popular after the report on August 8, 1467, when a man from Siena who stopped at the shrine to pray to Mary for protection and became invisible to his enemies who were chasing him. That very year, a small wooden chapel to house the image was constructed. At the present Hilltop Church, consecrated in 1617, on the third Sunday of September, near September 15th feast day of the Sorrowful Mother, Lucignano celebrates St. Mary of the Oak with religious services, food, games, and fireworks, and that is Holy Mary of the Oak, from Lucignano in Italy in 1467, and that's today's 365 Days with Mary project honoree, Our Lady of the Oak, Holy Mary of the Oak. For more information on this fascinating devotion, or any of the hundreds of other Marian devotions from around the world, you can go to 365dayswithmary.com. You can go to the Facebook page of 365 Days with Mary, or you can download the free app, 365 Days with Mary. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week where we try to find a miracle that happened on the day's date in some year in Christian history. And so for today's date, August 8th, in the year 1961, we have the story of the Jesuit priest, Father Luis Maria Andreu, who made the journey to the remote mountain village of San Sebastián de Garabandal in northern Spain. And you probably know about the extraordinary reports of Marian apparitions that were growing attention at that time. And he was intrigued by the accounts. Father Andreu approached these events with caution expected of a priest, and he was hoping to observe for himself what exactly was taking place. And that evening he joined a crowd watching the four young visionaries during one of their reported ecstasies. And so as the girls gauged towards what they were saying was the Virgin Mary, something changed dramatically in Father Andreu. And those nearby later recounted that the priest suddenly became overwhelmed with joy and repeatedly crying out, "Miracle, miracle, miracle." His face reportedly radiating happiness as he exclaimed that the Virgin had shown him something extraordinary, a grace so profound that words could hardly express it. And witnesses were struck by the sincerity and intensity of his reaction, especially from a man known for his intelligence, prudence, and I guess you could say skepticism. And Father Andreu never publicly explained what had he experienced, but according to those present, he simply insisted that he had received an immense gift from the Blessed Virgin, and his joyful exclamations became one of the most memorable moments in the history of the Garabandal events and continue to be recounted by those who support those apparitions. But within the Catholic Church, of course, we must acknowledge that no approval has been given to the supernatural character of the Garabandal apparitions. But the reaction of Father Andreu is certainly remarkable and notable, and it's one of the intriguing episodes associated with these reported visions. And that's today's Miracle of the Day from August 8th, 1961. Let's take a look at the sainthood news. In the most recent announcement coming out of the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints, Pope Leo received an audience. His Cardinal Marcello Semeraro, the prefect for the Dicastery for the Causes of Saints. And during this audience, the Supreme Pontiff authorized the same Dicastery to promulgate a decree regarding the heroic virtues of the servant of God, Clara Andreu y Malferit. Another Andreu, kind of interesting, right? Born Barbara Onofria, and she's a professed nun of the Jerome Monastery of San Bartolomeo de Inca. She was born on December 5th, 1596, in Palma de Mallorca in Spain, and she died on June 24th in Inca in Spain, and that was in 1628. And according to the Dicastery for the Dicastery for the Cause of Saints website, she was a professed nun of the Jerome Monastery of San Bartolomeo de Inca. She dedicated her entire short life to the service of God and the practice of virtue, and the salvation of souls was her greatest concern. Everyone recognized her special closeness to the Lord, and her work highlighted her as a woman full of charity towards others, capable of helping and consoling, gifted with patience and extraordinary humility. And that is the sainthood news for today. With one miracle, she will go on from being venerable down and then will become known as Blessed Clara Andreu y Malferit. And the might-be saint of the day for today is Blessed Maria Anna Rosa Caiani from Italy. And her memorial is celebrated on today, August 8th. And she was born on November 2nd, 1863, in Poggio a Caiano in Florence, in Italy. And as a young woman, Maria felt a call to service and religious life. When her parents died, relieving her family duties, she entered the Benedictine monastery at Pistoia in Italy in 1893. And she determined quickly that it was not the life for her, and she left after just a month. After seeking spiritual direction, she began traveling home again, teaching children in several places that lacked formal schools, and her work attracted like-minded young women, and in 1901, she received diocesan approval to organize them as a formal religious community. In 1902, she took the name Sister Maria Margherita, and the community became the Minims of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, Franciscan tertiaries who concentrated on teaching the young and caring for the elderly sick. They were later renamed the Minims Sisters of the Sacred Heart, and Sister Maria made her profession in 1905. 1915, she became Superior General of the Minims, and then the remaining 6 years of her life. She died on August 8, 1921, in Poggio a Caiano of natural causes, and her relics are enshrined in the chapel of the Mother House of the Minims Sisters of the Sacred Heart in Poggio a Caiano. She was declared venerable by John Paul II and then beatified on April 23, 1988, by John Paul II in St. Peter's Square in Rome. And she is Blessed Maria Anna Rosa Caiani. With one miracle, she will be known as Saint Maria Anna Rosa Caiani, and she's today's might-be saint of the day. For those people who are interested in They Might Be Saints, you can check out my book, They Might Be Saints, which is available at EWTNRC.com, the EWTN Religious Catalog. I think it's my best book. But people can also check out the series, which airs on EWTN Weekly. You can go to theymightbesaints.com to watch any of the episodes on demand. But this week we're looking at the life of and canonization cause of Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, beatified in 2020 after the miraculous cure of a young boy. And that was They Might Be Saints, Father Michael McGivney. Go to theymightbesaints.com for more information. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll be talking with Bret Thoman, author of St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love talking about some of the saints that we featured on the series Explore with the Miracle Hunter. And coming right up is the feast day of St. Clare of Assisi, who was featured with St. Francis of Assisi, of course, in the Explore Assisi episode. We're so excited today to be joined by the script writer for that episode and also the author of the book, St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister, and that's Bret Thoman. Welcome back to the show today, Bret.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
And why is St. Clare... She obviously has a little bit of competition in the sense of St. Francis there in Assisi is the big name, but she still has her own followers and she has an order that's stemmed from her life. Why is St. Clare still standing tall all these years later?
Yeah, she deserves it, and she probably deserves more. But, I'll say traditionally she was always considered sort of the little branch of St. Francis, and actually she referred to herself as that she was sort of this offshoot of this great tree that was St. Francis. It was a gesture of humility to refer to herself that way. But and then also, too, when the modern biography started coming out in the late 1800s, early 20th century, she was kind of considered, she was given often sort of a chapter. The book was dedicated to St. Francis, and then you would have St. Clare, Lady Clare, and what she did. Part of that is just the nature of her vocation, that she was lived a life of seclusion, really, in a cloister, and so she wasn't like Francis and the brothers who were out in the world, traveling from place to place, doing things, working miracles, preaching. She was praying contemplatively in a convent. But on the other hand, she didn't do it in a Benedictine sense. She did it in a Franciscan sense. That is, she wanted her life to be evangelical in her life of the sisters. So that's why I referred to my book in the title, Light from the Cloister, because she never wanted the sisters to be quiet and totally hidden. She wanted the people to know what they were doing and that they were living this evangelical new Franciscan life from the cloister, from within the enclosure. So she has a wonderful life. It's a beautiful life. Still not near as well known as St. Francis, again, because he was out there doing stuff. She was mostly hidden. But there has been, over the past several decades now, there's been a lot of research and kind of scholarship into her life. So she was, even though, again, she referred to herself as a little branch of St. Francis, she was the foundress of a religious order. So when you start to kind of get into the life of St. Clare, you realize that she was much more than just this contemplative nun who prayed all day. She was a woman that was doing quite a number of marvelous things.
And what was she actually doing at the time she met Francis? What was her life like, and what caused her to follow him in such a dramatic way?
Yeah, so she was an adolescent. We'd say probably a teenager today, but from when she met Francis the first time, she didn't actually meet him. She heard him preach in the Cathedral of San Rufino, which is next to the house where she grew up in. She grew up in a noble family. Her father was a knight. Her uncles were knights. Her cousins were knights. She was a lady. She was destined to be married off to some, handsome man of good reputation to kind of increase the family status, but she had a deep desire in her heart to live and give her life exclusively to Jesus. So when Francis kind of came to town, so to speak, he was already in town. They were from the same town. They were both from Assisi. By the way, he was about 10 years older than her. So when his conversion started, Assisi had maybe 10,000 people in it. Everybody was talking about it. It was big news, and a lot of the people, a lot of the brothers and the young men in Assisi were joining Francis, including St. Clare's first cousin. His name was Rufino. He became a friar, probably against the wish of their family, but we don't know. So she heard him preach in the cathedral, which was next to her family house. She was just lit on fire. She was incredibly enthusiastic. So there was meetings that were arranged between her and Francis, probably through her cousin Rufino. They met several times and kind of arranged what would happen. Again, since she was destined to be married to increase the lot of their family, she had to leave sort of in secret. So it was maybe scandalous, but when she was 18 years old, she left her house, kind of snuck out at night about midnight. There was some of the sources say that an older woman from the neighborhood helped her leave. They left. She walked out of the city gates of Assisi, walked down to those listeners who've been to Assisi will know where this is, St. Mary of the Angels. It's a large basilica kind of in the plains of Assisi. Walked there. Francis and the brothers met her in the Church of the Portiuncula. He shaved her head, put a veil over her head, which was the sign of consecration to religious life. And then the same night, they brought her to a Benedictine monastery for noble women, closed the doors, and that was sort of strategic because if anyone tried to take a consecrated woman out of this place by force, they would be excommunicated. So sure enough, the next day, the guys, the men woke up, the cousins, the uncles, the father. Where's Clare? They heard she joined Francis and the brothers, so they went to try and get her, rode down on their horses, galloped down, tried to talk her, out of coming out. She wouldn't, and there's this great story where she put one hand on the altar of this church called St. Paul of the Abbesses, San Paolo delle Abbadesse. With the other one, she took off her veil and showed her shaved head, which would have been very striking because she was 18, she had long, beautiful hair. Now she was shaved, and she said, I'm a religious woman, you can't touch me. They spent another couple of days trying to talk her out of going, leaving, coming home. She never did. And that was it. She went to one other place up on the slopes of Mount Subasio called Panzo. And then from there, she went to San Damiano with her blood sister, Agnes. She joined her a couple weeks later. They went to San Damiano. A few other women from the upper-class women from the neighborhood joined her. And in San Damiano, they started their religious life together, which was, again, based on poverty. It was a Franciscan life, although it was enclosed. There's no sources that say anything that Clare ever left the monastery except for one, when she went down to St. Mary of the Angels and had a picnic with St. Francis a meal some years later. Other than that, she stayed enclosed there in San Damiano.
Yeah, amazing stuff. We're talking today with Bret Thoman, the author of St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister. And I think one of the most remarkable scenes from the life of St. Clare, and it's depicted in the program Explore with the Miracle Hunter Assisi, is when the barbarians are trying to break into the convent, the cloister, and St. Clare has a defense for them. Talk a little bit about that dramatic scene in the life of St. Clare.
Yeah, sure. There was actually two such scenes, but the main one is when a group of, not barbarians, they would have been kind of Germanic peoples from the earlier Middle Ages. They were Saracens, is how they referred to them, which were today we would say Islamic people or Muslims, which the excommunicated emperor surrounded himself with kind of hitmen, if you will, who were Muslim, because Christians would not join him because they would have been excommunicated. So Muslims didn't care, so he would sort of send them off to raid monasteries, and he actually sent them to Assisi. They went to Assisi. They tried to get into the monastery of St. Clare, where Clare and the sisters were, and it would have been a very dramatic moment because you can imagine what they would have done. They would have not only plundered the convent, they would have taken the women off and done unspeakable things. But Clare had been meditating on the life of Christ, which is the second person of the Trinity, who intercedes for us and sacrifices himself, gives himself to the Father for us, for our salvation. So she had been meditating on this her whole life. So when they came up over the fence, she knew what she would do. She put herself between them and the sisters, who were really daughters to her at that point. She was going to give her life to save, if you will, or she was going to go first before they got to the sisters. But she also had the sacristans go into the tabernacle and bring the Holy Sacrament down to her. They held it up. it's depicted as St. Clare holding a monstrance, but it probably was like a pyx, which is sort of like a little box. She knelt down. She was so sick they had to kind of hold her upright, a couple of sisters and a couple of the brothers, and she held up this the Holy Eucharist. And so the Saracens came up over the fence, and we don't really know what they were thinking, but the sources say, and this comes from different sources from the Middle Ages, they came up over the fence. They saw this scene of this frail holy woman holding up something that was mysterious, and they were sort of thrown back. And they say that they were knocked back. They dropped their weapons, and they scurried back up over the fence that they had just climbed over in fright and fled. So it's a powerful scene, and it tells us two things. One, what a holy person can do in their sacrifice or willingness to sacrifice themselves, but also the Holy Eucharist itself, just how powerful it is. I mean, the Eucharist is not just bread. We know that we're faithful people, but there's a power behind the Eucharist, and Jesus saves, and in this case, he saved the sisters through the Eucharist. Powerful story.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. We've been talking today with Bret Thoman, author of St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister. And when we reflect on the life of St. Clare, what is her legacy? How is she remembered today?
Well, she's remembered as the first woman to write her own rule that was approved by the Pope. So they haven't really mentioned this yet, but she really struggled to find this kind of form, to come up with this form of life that was sort of acceptable to not just the church hierarchy, but the society in general, because in the Middle Ages, women's convents had an important need to the community, because a lot of people, women who could not be married or they were widowed, they would come into the convents. So the cardinals and popes who were sort of overseeing her way of life wanted it to be sustainable, if you will, and she wanted to live in poverty. And how she was living in San Damiano is how a lot of other women's convents were trying to live also. They were emulating her and going over to her way of life. So the hierarchy wanted to make sure it was sustainable, but she said, no, we want to live in poverty. We don't want to own lands. We don't want to rent things. We don't want to have dowries. When women would come into monasteries in those days, they would come in with dowries. So women from the upper class would, have a lot of money and lands, and they would just sort of bequeath them to the monastery. And so a lot of women's monasteries became quite wealthy. She said, nope, none of that. We are going to be poor. We're Franciscan. Francis was poor. Jesus was poor. Mary was poor. We want to be poor. So she said, we can only have a garden. We'll grow what we eat, and that's it. No dowries, and also no distinction between the sisters. If a woman came from the upper class or the lower class, if they could read Latin and pray the Psalter, didn't matter. Everyone would pray together. They would rotate work assignments. She said the women would work with their hands, which might sound kind of, what's the big deal? But in those days, the poor women, the servant women, worked with their hands. The noble women, which was Clare, they did not work with their hands. She said, in this monastery, we're going to be like Jesus, and Mary, we're going to work with our hands. So she struggled, and she had one cardinal and one pope wrote a rule for her, and both of them said this rule is Benedictine. They did allow for the privilege of poverty, but they said, no, you're Benedictine. She said, I'm not Benedictine, I am Franciscan. I want to be something new and novel. So she struggled her whole life, and she was her religious life lasted about 40 years, more than 40 years. And 2 days before she died, she had written a rule, and it was Franciscan, it wasn't Benedictine, it was her form of life. And the Pope, who was residing in Perugia at the time, now the popes live in Rome, but back then they lived throughout the papal states in various places, was in Perugia. He came to Assisi, he knew she was dying, and he granted her wish. He approved her rule, which she wrote and was approved 2 days before she died. When she died, they rolled up the rule and tucked it in with her, and they buried her in a little church called St. George, San Giorgio, which is today the Basilica of St. Clare.
Amazing. What an incredible life. For people who want to learn more about St. Clare and your book, St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister, what's the best place that people should go?
It's published by Tan Books, which you can get it through Tan's website. I think St. Benedict Press, Tan Books, or Amazon. But if you can get it through Tan Books, I think it's probably better. And
your website, Bret?
stfrancispilgrimages.com. Yeah, we organize pilgrimages to Assisi and all throughout central Italy and Italy itself. So, yeah, I've been doing that for about 20 years.
Wonderful. Well, keep up the great work. We're so grateful to you, Bret Thoman, for joining us to tell us about your book, St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister, and talking to us about this great saint whose feast day is upon us on August 11th. Thanks so much for being with us on today's program.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
God bless. That was Bret Thoman. Check out his book, St. Clare of Assisi, Light from the Cloister. And that's all the time we have for today's program. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio. Check out the audio archives or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Brian V. Caufield, the vice-postulator for Blessed Michael McGivney, and also Bret Thoman talking to us about St. Clare of Assisi. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. The next episode airs on Sunday, August 8th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. We look at Rocamadour. The Church of Rocamadour houses an image and bell that, according to legend, mysteriously rings out to herald miracles happening on the high seas. I investigate that one on Explore with the Miracle Hunter Rocamadour on Saturday, August 8th at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.